I am delighted to introduce Joe Flack from the ACE project, which are you based in Ipswich? I know you cover all of Suffolk, don't you, Joe? But are you based in Ipswich?
We are indeed, yeah.
So Joe runs the ACE project, which supports young people aged between 16 and 24, and we're going to talk a lot about the work that Joe does and her experiences. So, Joe, thank you for joining us. Thanks for giving up time.
It's a pleasure.
Can I just sort of kick off, just so, because of for the people watching, just talk a bit about your background and what led you into this kind of field of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Cambridgeshire back in the rocking 1980s. And then at 18, I kind of swapped one historic university town for another. I went to study at Oxford. And during that time, I worked, while I was studying, worked part-time as a teaching assistant in a local school. And that got me really interested in working with young people and also interested in kind of education. So that led in a roundabout circuitous route to me becoming a high needs teacher here in Suffolk and Ipswich. So I supported young people with learning difficulties and what was then called kind of emotional behavioural difficulties. And kind of during that time, supporting young people kind of struggling with emotions and struggling with their behaviours, I became really interested in kind of working in mental health, and also having had my own lived experience of mental health difficulties, it was something I was really passionate about.
Okay. So you just touched on your own lived experience there. I mean, our newspaper, we've interviewed you before about that experience. Could you talk a little bit about that now? So you had basically challenges around obsessive compulsive disorder. So are you comfortable just talking a little bit about that now?
Absolutely, yes. I'm a big advocate of being as open as we can possibly be around mental health. And one of the best ways to learn is from people with lived experience. So absolutely very happy to talk about my experience. So yeah, obsessive compulsive disorder is an anxiety disorder, and it's kind of characterized by obsessions, so obsessive thoughts that leads to kind of compulsive behaviors. And my kind of particular brand of OCD, because it's very, very different for everybody, was contamination OCD, which meant that I was basically trying to sanitize my entire environment to prevent myself or things I care about or my possessions coming into contact with any kind of germs or dirt. And as you can imagine, that's a tall order, and understandably, I became kind of very unwell. At the time, it almost felt like it kind of snuck up on me out of nowhere. Like it's almost like I didn't see it coming. And, there are a few things happening, and then all of a sudden it kind of escalated and I became really quite unwell. But looking back, kind of reflecting as we do, I was suffering from anxiety difficulties back when I was at primary school, but it just wasn't picked up on. I was suffering from kind of sickness every day, and the doctors kept kind of looking at, oh, is it irritable bowel syndrome? Have you got a food intolerance? And it just wasn't picked up that actually I was struggling. I was anxious back then. And a big part of me feels that if I'd been aware of it back then and I'd been able to learn the skills and strategies to deal with anxiety, then I might not have become as severely unwell as I did. And I became very unwell. I mean, at my worst, and this is genuinely no exaggeration, I could get trapped in the bathtub for 8 hours, unable to get out because I wouldn't feel clean enough. And I mean, what does feeling clean look like? No wonder I got stuck.
Yeah. So when did you realise that it was a big problem? Was there a moment or a?
I think it kind of, like I say, it kind of snuck up on me. So I was starting to do little rituals and having little obsessions. And to be honest, I didn't really, because again, I probably didn't really have the self-awareness until I became really, really ill that I absolutely need to do something. So I really kind of almost hit crisis before I sought support, which I would not recommend for anybody. And I think it's not aided by the fact that OCD in kind of popular culture, it's become a bit of an unfortunate term for people kind of referring to it as, you know, I'm a little bit OCD because they like, I don't know, to have their cups facing outwards. And
it
that's very different.
trivializes it, doesn't it?
It really does. And I
Yeah.
think for people who are suffering, to have it trivialized makes you kind of feel a bit like you don't want to seek help, because it's kind of stigmatized. And it's like, oh, I'm making a big deal out of nothing. And actually what really helped me was finding a therapist who understood the severity of my disorder. And it wasn't easy to find that therapist, I'll be truthful. I had to go through a few. But yeah, and so that, to be honest, that's why I kind of wrote the book. It was partway through my recovery journey I started writing the book, because I wanted to create awareness so that people knew how debilitating this disease is.
Yeah. So can you articulate just how much it impacted your life? What I mean, it must have almost brought your life to a complete halt, did it?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because I'm kind of what would be termed as somebody with functioning anxiety. I don't particularly like that term, but as in I was still getting up and going to work every day. So I was in society doing societal things, but I would honestly describe it as just surviving, not living. I was getting by. And I tell you what, it's incredibly wearing, going to work every day and trying to carry on as normal when you've got all of that anxiety disorder in your head. It's almost a double whammy, because you're really unwell, but you're trying to put on a front that you aren't. And that is absolutely exhausting.
Draining. Yeah, draining. So how did you manage to overcome it and manage it?
Well, the best piece of advice I was ever given was somebody telling me to go and get help, because I'm quite, I'm not gonna lie, I'm quite a stubborn and independent person. You know, when it kind of started, I was a bit like, you know, this is my brain that's kind of, you know, malfunctioning. So, you know, my brain should be able to sort it out. I've got this, I've got the skills to deal with this. I did not have the skills to deal with this. And so after a lot of coercion, and like I say, I got very, very unwell before I sought help. I went and got help, and that was the start of my recovery journey. And I wish I'd done it sooner. I really do.
So what kind of help did you get? What was the advice? I'm sorry to get into the detail of it, but it's such an interesting subject. What were the steps you actually took to start managing it and dealing with it?
So, I mean, that's a convoluted story, to be honest. I knew that I needed therapeutic input. I'd got to that stage whereby I needed somebody, a professional, to work with me. My brain was so fogged, I couldn't manage it myself. So I contacted the Wellbeing service, and there happened to be a trial going on for self-help for OCD. And I thought, again, that suited me because I'm independent. I'm like, yeah, I'll do something with that. It worked to a certain extent, but I think I was so unwell that I actually needed some proper therapeutic input. I was supposed to be on the waiting list while I was doing the trial to get some therapy, but that turned out not to happen. I eventually did manage to, in the meantime, I sought out a private therapist because I was waiting so long on the NHS. And although she said she understood OCD, she wasn't really kind of taking me seriously because I presented as kind of smiling and okay. She didn't understand the severity underneath it. I eventually, after, I'm not kidding, probably 2 years, got referred to somebody with the NHS, and I went to see a therapist. She was great, but she then ended up leaving partway through my sessions, and I then received a letter saying, partway through my sessions, bear in mind, so I wasn't kind of there yet, saying, oh, I hope you enjoyed your sessions. All the best, bye now. And it was like, oh, right, we haven't kind of finished the work. And because it's incredibly hard when you're suffering emotionally to motivate yourself to go and seek help, that's not an easy thing. I then left it another year or two before I thought, no, I need to get back into the NHS to get support. And eventually through that, I found a wonderful therapist who grasped the severity of what was going on for me. And that was the true start of my recovery journey.
Great. And so how long ago was that? That was a number of years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, blimey. So that was a long time ago. That was probably back in like kind of 2014, something like that, 2014, yeah.
And you wrote a book about the experience. Just to share that experience and try and help others.
Yeah, absolutely. To help others, to make them see that they're not on their own suffering through this.
Yeah.
But also I had a wider audience in mind, because I wanted people to understand, you know, not to see OCD as a quirky personality trait, and to actually understand that it is such a, you know, it's so debilitating.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for speaking so honestly about that. And that, so that helps provide a bit of picture about your kind of background. So just so let's move on to the ACE project. How that came about and why. What did you see that wasn't happening that needed to happen?
Yeah, so whilst I was working as a high needs trainer, I went to a meeting with the it was based with the local authority, but it was lots of partnership organisations working in alternative education, and the gap was raised there that for young people leaving compulsory education, so 16, with mental health difficulties, because whilst they're in compulsory education, they had to be provided with some form of education. So a lot of them were being home tutored and things like that, because the anxiety or whatever was going on for them prevented them from accessing school. But when they hit 16, all that provision stopped. So you had lots of young people aged 16 who had been going to school, or even, you know, studying from home, which at least was giving them some positivity, some structure, something to promote their emotional well-being, to them having nothing. And being passionate about mental health, of course, I tried to kind of meet that gap through the organisation I was teaching with, and we kind of looked at a business plan and things like that. But sadly, the upshot was that it wasn't lucrative enough, because there's just simply not enough money in mental health. So I decided that I would leave teaching and set something up myself, and yeah, ACE was born.
Wow. So so did you see cases where people, you know, at that age 16, in those years beyond that, they would just be left and there would be no support or little support?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a massive gap, and we decided to go up to 24 as well, because there was also a massive gap for young people who were leaving children's services, NHS children's services, and transferring onto adult services. And quite often that transfer didn't happen for whatever reason, mainly funding. I'm not criticising, like I say, that there's some absolutely brilliant NHS workers out there doing absolutely brilliant mental health work, but it's just there's not enough money to meet demand. So yeah, huge gaps. And like I say, I think that it's talking about my own lived experience and bringing that to bear on the young people and kind of empathizing with them. Like I say, when you are suffering emotionally, it's really difficult to motivate yourself to seek help. And if help isn't out there and available and you're supported to access it, then you know you're going to struggle, if you do need that extra help, to start your wellbeing journey.
Yeah. So what sort of work do you do then with young people? First of all, how do they become aware of you and your organisation, and then what happens?
Yeah, so basically we get referrals from all over the place. So we do lots of partnership work with lots of wonderful organisations in Suffolk, a lot of whom are here with you today. Young people can self-refer as well. So we've got kind of a social media presence where young people can find out about us. And then our kind of first step is that we meet up with the young person and we kind of look at an individual kind of action plan, as it were. So what they need to get themselves well. And it's based on the ACE approach to wellbeing. So that's about meeting your emotional needs through achieving, connecting with others and enjoying. So our aim is to help people to achieve, to kind of learn the skills and strategies and life skills for wellbeing, to connect with others and to connect with the wider community. So we do a lot of partnership work linking young people in with organisations that can help them, and to have kind of positive activities to go to and enjoy. So our core work is weekly wellbeing workshops. And we also have weekly fitness sessions where we have an absolutely marvellous personal trainer who's a young person himself with lived experience of mental health difficulties, where we use physical exercise to boost wellbeing as well. And we have a very tiny pot of funding coming up in June to do some one-to-one therapeutic work too.
Okay. On the subject of funding, so you're funded by other, where does funding come from?
It's a lot of work.
Is it?
So we are, at the moment, we're funded primarily by the National Lottery, Reaching Communities Fund. We do have lots of other pots of funding, people who are helping us. We've got a little bit of pod funding from Comic Relief. We've got a bit of pot of funding from the Ports Fund, Felixstowe Port Fund. And we've had support through Active Suffolk, but and we are a very small grassroots charity. We are me, a volunteer, and some trustees. It's really hard to get core funding.
Yeah.
And actually, the biggest pot of core funding we got was the National Lottery funding, which kicked in at the start of last year. So we were expecting a period of really kind of sustainable growth for 2 years, looking forward. And then, of course, COVID hit. So it's an ongoing challenge to kind of get core funding so we can kind of use the money where it's most needed with our youngsters.
Yeah, I mean, we in the previous discussion, we kind of touched on funding for organisations that are providing lots of mental health, really valuable, essential mental health services in Suffolk, and it's been, the last year has been difficult to actually get funding in some ways. Lots of traditional fundraising activities have just stopped. So yeah, I mean, so that's the reason for asking, because the likes of your work, the need for it going forward will probably only grow, won't it? So there's an issue there around making sure that organisations that are making a real tangible difference to the lives of young people, in this case in Suffolk, need to be supported.
Yeah.
Okay, so the young people who you work with, what are some of the most common issues and challenges that they face when they come to you?
It's really varied, to be honest. So we will work with anybody who wants support for their mental health. So that means that some of our young people will have diagnosis of mental health difficulties. Some of our young people won't. They'll be suffering from low mood and they want support with that. So they do really come with lots of kind of varied things going on for them. I mean, to give you a kind of an illustration of a kind of a young person that we're working with, he actually self-referred to the project, and he has a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. And when he joined us, he wasn't in a very good place. He was making some quite unhealthy life choices. He had got heavily involved in substance misuse and had got in trouble with the police, and that had led to him kind of losing his tenancy agreement. So when he came to us, he wasn't in the best of places. So we were able to support him to access a housing officer for support for housing, referred him to substance misuse services, and he started engaging in our workshops, which were able to give him some kind of structure to his week, something positive to look forward to, give him a supportive group of peers that he could connect with, and give him the chance to kind of learn the skills and strategies to make more healthy life choices. Mm-hmm. And so he now is in training, which is absolutely fantastic. He is working with Workwell Suffolk to look for some part-time, either paid or voluntary work, and he is being helped into supported accommodation. So his journey has been quite a significant and impressive journey from where he was to where he's at now.
But that's fantastic, isn't it? Because you think if your project hadn't have taken him under your wing, supported him, given him some advice and help, things might have ended up quite different there. And this is the kind of grassroots work that is so effective. So that's a great example of how you can turn lives around. And then again, talking at the discussion we had earlier, that the feeling actually helping other people is actually really good for your mental health as well, isn't it? So
absolutely, yeah, it's part of it, meets kind of a lot of our emotional needs in terms of being respected by others, in terms of achieving for ourselves, having some meaning and purpose in our lives. So absolutely. And we actually, one of our young people who has completed her time on the project, now we're happily starting to go back to face from the 17th of May, which me and the young people are incredibly excited about. We have a young person who's completed her time on the project who's now going to start volunteering for the project. So it's really lovely for her to kind of give back and support others, because like you say, it's so protective for your well-being to do volunteering and to help other people.
Great. Just a reminder to all those watching, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to any that we are asked now. Just rewinding a little bit, Joe. So, when you first, what year would you say it was you first started working in this area?
So I started volunteering in this area first, actually. So that was probably, again, going back to round about kind of 2015 kind of time. And actually my journeys are never kind of in a straight line, are they? So my first kind of work in this area was I was involved with the Time to Change campaign. I don't know if people are familiar with that. So it was run by Rethink Mental Illness and National Mind. And it was about people using their lived experience to challenge stigmatizing attitudes towards mental health. And I was a champion for them. And through that, got involved in training up some of their champions to use their lived experience to change attitudes. And so I started, I did some freelance work working with National Mind. So that was my kind of first, I suppose, professional role in mental health. But of course, all my stuff as a teacher, a lot of that, although technically I was a teacher, teachers will all know that you are not just teaching maths and English, you are doing pastoral support as well. So to be honest, I feel supporting people with mental health has always been part of what I do, because if you're working with young people, it's important you have those skills. Yeah,
and the reason for asking is I was going to say, even that relatively short period of time, have you seen any changes in the challenges faced by young people?
Yeah, do you know what? And this is being completely honest, I don't think I'd want to be a young person today. It's really challenging, and I really feel for them.
Why?
I think, and I know this is a bit, probably people are a little bit sick of hearing it, and young people probably are too, but I think the technological age has a lot to answer for. I think that social media and things like that put a lot of expectations on young people that I didn't have when I was growing up. A lot of them unrealistic and unattainable kind of expectations, which can affect self-esteem and well-being. I also think that in this age of technology, young people, through absolutely no fault of their own, are missing out on opportunities to develop key skills. So, take, for example, the fact that, if a young person is feeling a little bit, gets a little glimpse of, or a little bit bored, they've got things on demand. Go on Netflix, kind of scroll through my phone. And then that means that when they are feeling a bit bored or low in mood, they've never really had the opportunity to learn the strategies to boost their mood and look for positive activities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
And I think it's a huge challenge.
But how do you change that behaviour? Because every, teenagers have all got a smartphone. Most of them have. They have the world at their fingertips, but how do you make them realise that actually it's not healthy, and actually for their own development, their own mental health, actually just connecting with other people face to face, doing other things, getting outside, actually it's a good thing. It's hard, isn't it?
It is hard, and I tell you what, the word is education. I really kind of see myself as I love educating. I started out as a teacher, and kind of what I do with young people in mental health is kind of teaching. We are educating the young people. And I think that's what it's about. I think it's about, and by all means, I'm not saying I use social media, and it's very useful in a lot of ways. It's good for spreading awareness of mental health for a start. But it's about educating young people in how technology can be used to meet needs in healthy ways, because there are. are some ways it can be helpful and help you connect, but also making them aware that sometimes social media will kind of make promises to meet your emotional needs for kind of, say, connection or respect or attention, but actually that's not meeting it in healthy ways, and that there are better ways of kind of doing that. So I think it's about, you know, having that dialogue with young people so that they can understand the impact it can potentially have on their well-being. And I'm by no means condemning technology. I'm just saying I think with the advance of technology comes challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everybody would agree social media can be a tremendous force for good, and achieve some amazing things that would have never have been possible in the past, but also it can be pretty terrible sometimes. Okay, so Joe, from your own experience, particularly going back to when you were kind of managing the OCD, what's the best piece of advice anybody gave you?
Not to delay in seeking help. Genuinely not to delay in seeking help. And that could be all kinds of things. For me, like I said earlier, that was therapeutic support was the help that I needed. But the truth is that we all need to take responsibility for our own well-being. You know, that's a fact. It doesn't just come. We need to look after our own well-being. And yeah, my advice, the advice that was given me would be my advice to anybody who's listening, who's kind of struggling, is if you are struggling, not to delay in seeking help, whatever that is. Like I say, for me, it was therapeutic, professional therapeutic help that I needed, but it might be help through friends, through family members, self-help. You know, there's some good self-help stuff out there, or seeking help through, you know, some of the organizations that you've got represented today to take that first step towards becoming well again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good answer. Good answer. And then the next question was really going to be, if there's any young person watching this, who may be struggling with their mental health, what's the best advice you could give them? Is it the same thing really? Is it just seek help? Just talk to somebody?
Yeah, seek help in whatever way best suits you. Like I say, we are all different. For some people, it might be really hard to talk to somebody. And again, there are some really, really good resources kind of out there. Like on Young Minds website, they've got some really, really great resources on there. The Suffolk Mind website has some really, really good stuff as well. So, you know, whatever form works for you to, yeah, absolutely, to make active steps towards being well again. And I appreciate, like I say, that is really challenging when you're in low mood, because your motivation goes and you're kind of stuck in a fog of just kind of getting through every day, but things aren't probably going to change unless active changes are kind of made to make yourself well again.
What can families do? Families who are worried about, you know, a young person in the family who they're slightly concerned about, what would you say to them?
I would just say be really open and honest about having conversations about well-being. I think it's really important that you let your child or young person know that it's okay to talk about these things. And obviously, you know what teenagers are like. Sometimes they kind of they don't want to hear you, and there's kind of a lot of resistance. But just kind of keeping that door open and letting people know that, one, there is support available, but also two, to kind of that there is hope for recovery. You know, recovery is absolutely possible and likely. And I think, you know, sometimes a lot of the young people I work with, they've become so stuck with where they are that they kind of feel like, because they've been depressed for several years, that, you know, I am a depressive, you know, they identify as that's a part of them. Like if you cut them open, it would say depressive running down it like a stick of rock, you know, but actually to say, to give the message that there is hope for recovery and change. So yeah, they would be my kind of two key pieces of advice, to kind of keep the conversation open, and to convey hope for recovery and hope for change.
Absolutely. And what's next for the ACE project?
Well, exciting times are ahead. Like I say, we're week commencing the 17th. That's next week now, isn't it? Yeah, we are back to face-to-face workshops, which is lovely. So they're taking place every Thursday. If any young people are listening and they're interested in joining us, a really friendly, laid-back, small groups, really accessible, run by me, and with the help of my my two volunteers, because one of our young people's volunteering as well. And we're also running weekly fitness sessions with WS Training in town. They're an alternative education provider, also on a Thursday afternoon. And we are getting up and running some workshops in Felixstowe as well. So, and starting hopefully some therapeutic one-to-one work as well. So we've got a lot going on, but to be honest, when I'm not out and about running all these various things, I will be devoting my time to trying to get some kind of core funding, because yeah, as from January next year, that's when our various pots are due to run out. So yeah, that's the main focus. Obviously, the young people are the main focus, so getting out and starting working with them and supporting them again. But in order to support them, I unfortunately need to do the background work of lots of bid writing.
Yeah, I bet that's fun.
So.
Jo, thanks so much for speaking to us. Thanks for you know, I know you say you want to be open about your own experiences, but you know, really appreciate your honesty in that, and actually for the words of advice and for all the good work that you do. So thank you very much. Been a pleasure talking to you. And that's the end of this session.